This is a B6 traveller's notebook which I've just made, and I make it step by step in the tutorial you're about to watch. The front and the back are paper from the Planners Anonymous January Book Lover kit. I've then got a leather rectangular spine on it and leather on the inside of it. I make all of my traveller's notebooks using templates, which I have shared on Cricut Design Space, and I have other tutorials where I talk about these templates and different sizes of traveller's notebooks. But if you'd like to watch this process step by step, please stay tuned. This is my B6 traveller's notebook template, and it is 7.9 by 13 inches. So the first thing I need to do to make a traveller's notebook with a piece of US letter paper such as this is to cut it in half, as I need to make a spine in order to get a 13-inch width. As you can see, this isn't wide enough, it's only 11 inches. So I need to cut it in half and cut it down to 7.9 inches high. I use this Fiskars Precision rotary cutter for my cutting, and I'm just going to put this at approximately 7.9 inches. And just slice this little bit off, and then I'm just going to cut it in half. So we can see it's approximately 11 inches, so half of that would be 5.5 inches. So we'll just pop that on 5.5 inches and cut that there. So now I have two pieces of paper, which are the front and the back of the traveller's notebook, and obviously I can decide which way I want each piece of paper and which one I want to be the front and the back, but I'll make that decision a little bit later. After I've cut the paper into two halves, I want to decoupage them. So decoupage is a sealant. This is a Pratley's Craftex decoupage, and I put 2 layers of this on my paper that I make traveller's notebooks covers with. You don't need to put the decoupage on, so if you're not interested in this stage, just go forward to the next phase. But I like, oh, that's too fat. I like to use decoupage just because I like the texture that it creates. So I have a foam brush, and I just dip it in the decoupage. And the first layer, I'm just going to go up and down. And just up and down on this one also. Then to smooth it all out nicely, I just use the widest foam brush I have and just go up and down with the widest brush. This paper is actually curling, which is quite intriguing. I've never had it curling before, but we shall see. Hopefully it all works out fine. I'm just going to smooth that up and down, and then we'll wait about 30 minutes for that to dry. So while I wait, I just pop my foam brushes in a plastic bag just to save me having to clean them. It's been about 30 minutes and the first coat is dry. I'm just going to put a second coat of decoupage on the paper, and this time I'm going to go side by side. As I did before, I just finished with the widest foam brush that I have, just to try and get some even strokes there, because you do see the decoupage texture at the end. So doing it both ways like this, you get a nice crosshatch sort of effect. It's now the next day, and these have been overnight in a hardcover book just to make sure they're completely flat. What I want to do now is just cut a cardboard spine that will go in the centre. There's a 2-inch gap in the centre, as these make 11 inches, and I like to make my traveller's notebooks a wide 13 inches. So I'm going to cut a spine that's actually 2.5 inches wide, so it will overlap a little bit. So here's my paper cutter and just a piece of scrap cardboard that I have. I'll just make a nice straight edge to start. And then I'm going to make that 2.5 inches. It'll overlap each side about 1/4 of an inch. And that's going to be about 7.9 inches high. So you can see now it'll work a little bit like that, and then the leather spine will attach on top of that. So what you can do is just make a paper spine. You can do, this is like actual cardstock. I say paper, but this is actually double-sided patterned paper. It's not just printer paper or something. But you can make the spine however you like, with whatever you like. So the next stage, once you've got these 3 parts which make the cover, is to put heat fusible interfacing on it, and that's what you use to attach the lining. I use this heat fusible interfacing. I'll just pop this on so you can read it. It's a Legacy brand which is made in the US. It's a fusible web. It's called Easy Steam 2. It's a 2-sided pressure sensitive fusible web. It's called steam. I do not use a steam iron with leather at all, so I just use a medium dry iron to bond them. So if we just read this, it says Legacy Easy Steam 2 is an innovative fusible web that is extremely versatile in its ability to bond fabrics and other materials without sewing. Gotta love that. It has a pressure sensitive adhesive on each side to temporarily hold both materials in place before creating a permanent bond through fusing. Easy to use with fabric, cardboard, paper, batting, ribbon, patches, foam, wood and more. I've experimented with a few different things, and this really is my favourite, and I buy that just at my local sewing supply store. It comes on rolls, well, not a roll, it comes on a piece of cardboard about this size, so it's about 12 inches high, and basically it's just wrapped round and round, and you just buy whatever length that you want to buy. So what I need to do now is just cut enough to actually cover my traveller's notebook. So I need to cut it just a little bit bigger than what my traveller's notebook is going to be, because it's always better to cut something a little bit bigger and waste a little bit than to not have enough. So you can just cut this with scissors. I'm just using this because it's here. It should be big enough for what I want to use, as you can see here. So I'm actually just going to trim a little bit off here as well, just because it is easier to work with sort of the less of it that you have. And as I did say, you can just cut this with scissors, so it's not difficult to cut. And then if you look at it, it has a glossy side and it has just a paper side. So what you want to do is peel the glossy paper off the webbing. And I find the best way to do this is to put a little rip in the corner until you can see the web. So you can see a bit of the sticky webbing there. So I'm just going to pop my nail this side of the webbing, so between the webbing and the glossy paper. Just going to pop it down here. And just peel that off. You can see we've got some air bubbles, well not air bubbles, just bubbles on it. So we just want to try and smooth that off. It is very sticky, so just try and use your nails or something, because every time you stick to it you create a new problem. Right, so there it is there. And now what we need to do is lay the cover down. So I've decided to make the cover just like the piece of paper was. So I'm just going to try and use this grid pattern on here to, whoops, that moved. Anyway, there's the first one down, and then I'm just going to line that up with the grid pattern so I can see the size that I'm going for. And this one here wants to be 13 inches, so this one's on 3 inches, so this one I need to put onto 16 inches. Another thing to do would just be to go from here, so I made this 1/4 of an inch bigger, so that should be about there. And then I use the 1/4 inch mark again to pop this one down. And you can see I'm on 16 inches there. So the only thing is I want the spine to be on top of those bits of paper. So I just want to lift the spine up. Just peel that one back. Things are not permanently stuck until they're heated. Pop that down and then pop the spine on top. Oh, I've just thought of something. There'll be nothing fusing these two bits of, because I've made this wider than I have before. I've always just made it 2 inches in the past, but there'll be nothing fusing these bits here and here. They'll just be cardboard on top of cardboard. So I probably want to actually put some fusible here, or else cut it down to 2 inches so it just sits there. I was just hoping by overlapping it a little bit it would make it a little bit more rigid in the spine. So I think what I'm going to do is just pop a little bit of that spare heat fusible that I cut off onto here. So we'll just get the glossy side again, so just put a little rip in it to get to the webbing. Oh no, it's stuck on itself. It's a nightmare when it sticks on itself. So we'll just stick that onto the heat fusible. You can see this side's not stuck at all to this. Sometimes they are sticky on both sides. This one not so. So what I need to do now is just trim all that excess off. You can just use scissors to cut around it. So what will happen when we heat it is both layers will just heat up. So therefore we'll get adhesion in here between these two bits of cardstock. So we'll just pop that down approximately in the centre. And when that's heated, that will fuse. I don't know why I always decide to do different things when I'm filming, but why not? It's half the fun, isn't it, to try different things. So what I need to do now is just cut the heat fusible off the edges of all of this. And like I said before, you can just use scissors, but because I have this here, I'm just going to use this rotary cutter. Oh, there's a bit there. Oh no, I cut a little bit of the cover off. That's a pain. Just going to trim this bit here, as I did cut a little bit of the paper. So this way everything will be even. And the traveller's notebook will be just a little bit shorter than it was originally. If you're still with me, I've got my two bits of paper. And I've got a cardboard spine here. The spine has heat fusible webbing on the inside of it, so it will stick down onto the paper here and here. And then we've got heat fusible webbing all on this side. So that's where we're at now. And the next step is to choose what you want to be on the inside of the traveller's notebook cover. Peel the paper off, apply whatever you want to be on there, and then use an iron to adhere those two together. Here I am at the ironing board, and I have this brown leather. It's coming up much brighter on screen than it actually is. I'm trying to trick the camera here. If you see the dark brown here, this is more the colour of it, and then as you can see, it's overexposing on the camera. But anyway, it's a dark brown leather, and it's got all of these lovely marks in it. So it looks nice and aged, and that's what I'm wanting to use inside this traveller's notebook. So we need to flip the leather so that we have the reverse side of the leather here. And then we need to peel the paper off the heat fusible interfacing and pop the interfacing down next to the leather, like so. There's a little bit of adhesive on that, so that sticks. So you can see that there is a teeny little hole in the hide here that will be somewhere on the spine of the traveller's notebook. I'm not concerned about that at all. I think that adds a bit of character to it. Then what we want to do is put the parchment paper or baking paper down on top of the paper, and then the iron is on a dry heat. There's no steam at all, and it's on a medium temperature, and I'm just going to place the iron straight down in the center of it and hold it for a few seconds, and pretty much just go all around the cover with the iron so that all the heat basically fuses that interfacing and makes the paper and the leather join together. I don't really know how long that was. It wasn't very long. I just want to check if it's adhered. Another way of checking is that these two bits of paper here are adhered to each other, which they are. The corner's not quite stuck down, so I think a little more heat would be a good idea. I don't really have any science behind how long I iron anything. You want to make sure you don't heat the leather too much, but obviously you want the two to stick together. I'm just going to use my steel ruler and rotary cutter again just to cut the edges. You could just use scissors. The rotary cutter will just do a quicker and maybe a cleaner job. So you can see inside is the leather. It's much darker than it's showing on screen. You can see in the shot sort of the texture in the leather at least. So that's the traveller's notebook there. You can go this way or this way. And what I'm going to do now is just attach the spine to the outside of it. So this is the height of the traveller's notebook, and I cut this 3 inches across just using the rotary cutter and the steel ruler like I've just done. And what I need to do now is put the heat transferable interfacing on this side so I can attach it to the traveller's notebook. The reason I cut it first is really just to use the minimum amount of leather in doing the spine. So if I put heat transferable onto here and then cut the spine out, I would have been left with some leather with the heat transferable on it. And I like to use my leather, I don't like to waste it. I have a little offcut of the heat fusible webbing here, so I'm just going to use this to put on the reverse side of the leather spine. So just in the same way, just ripping the glossy bit and trying to find the webbing. Here you hopefully see it's peeling away from the webbing. Just going to use that to help hold it. And just going to pop the leather on there. Right, I did cut the spine actually a little bit taller than the traveller's notebook, so it may need some trimming after I pop it on, but I'm just going to cut the interfacing off. Right, I'm just going to try and tidy up this last edge as the leather did stretch a little bit when I popped it on the heat fusible. So I just want to try and have a straight edge to put on my traveller's notebook. I've just put this ruler here where this bit's pointing to the middle of the cover, so the 6.5 inch mark. And I've just peeled the paper backing off the spine, and we're going to pop that on here. So I want to put it in the middle, so between like the 8 and the 11 inch mark, like so, between 8 and 11 inches. And because I cut it at 8 inches high, it's got a little bit, you can see at the top of the bottom, that will need chopped off. It's always good to check measurements before you iron. If you just check here that you have 5 inches at the top and 5 inches at the bottom, and same with the gap here. There's 5 inches and 5 inches. Back at the ironing board, we just need to iron the spine on. So we just want to put the parchment paper or the baking paper on the spine and make sure we have a dry medium heat, and then just place the iron on there to start the process. What I want to do now is just trim these little bits off the top and the bottom where I cut the spine a bit too tall to make sure it was too big rather than too small. This is the cover now. We've got the spine attached and the leather on the inside of the cover. I've decided with this tutorial it'll be completely no sew, so I may sew pockets inside this, but if I do I'll have a separate tutorial for that. So the next step to make this into a traveller's notebook cover is to add the holes in order to be able to thread the elastics. On my template I have the holes inserted here, so I can use the template like so and pop the holes in. But if you don't want to make yourself a template, the edge of the hole is approximately 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre from the edge of the cover, and the 3 holes are in the centre of the width, and this hole here is in the immediate centre of everything. The way that I use the template to put my holes in it is just to lay the template on top of the cover, and then I just use these clips to help hold the two together. So I have this, I've got my template there. Then I use this, which is a We Are Memory Keepers crocodile. It's an eyelet hole punch and setter, and I use it on the 1/8 of an inch hole here, just to make these holes near the edge. And I basically just look for where the hole is. Hopefully you can see that there, and just punch like so. The little bits of hole often get stuck inside there, so sometimes you need to shake it a little bit to get them out, and then you can punch the next hole. Let's punch the 3 holes on this edge and the 3 holes on this edge. Obviously it won't reach into the center to punch this. There is another tool, We Are Memory Keepers crocodile, I think it's called the long arm or something like that, and it has a much longer reach and it could punch this hole also. I don't have it, so I just use a chopping board, and I use one of these leather hole punches in order to punch the hole in the center. These are hollow leather punches, and I just buy them in a set from the hardware store, and this one is the 1/8 of an inch circle. So I just pop that on the hole here and use a hammer to punch that. Okay, bashing it worked in this case. We have a hole all the way through in the center. Okay, so now I remove the template, and as you can see I have the holes ready for stringing the elastics through. I do have eyelets which I can attach to these holes, but generally I prefer just to leave them as they are. And eyelets also can always be added at a later stage. The next step is to measure out the amount of elastic that you need to string this. With the 3 holes, you can have 4 pieces of elastic going up and down. So what I do is I measure 4 times and then about halfway. So this is about 4.5 times the height of the traveller's notebook. And what I always do to the elastic is just heat seal the ends to stop that from fraying. I just use a lighter for this purpose. This elastic's a bit of a metallic, shiny elastic. So you can see it quite well there. And it's a 2mm round elastic. That's what I use for my traveller's notebooks. To thread it, I go up the centre hole down to about halfway, and then I get the other end of the elastic and thread that into the hole beside the centre hole. Then all the way down to the bottom, so that's in a straight line. And up the centre. And back down the centre hole. The best way to do this is just to hold this elastic a bit to the side and then push that one in. Then up this hole, back down to the bottom. And then we want to go back through the centre hole. So I'm just holding this other elastic off to the side and threading that in. Then all you do is tie a knot here. And you can then trim the elastics to fit. This may be a little bit long, so I might trim that later. If you do trim it, just remember to heat seal it again is a good idea. Then for the elastic that goes around the outside, I measure the width of the traveller's notebook and then about another inch. And just chop that there. Oh, I just noticed that little bit there. There we go. That wasn't pushed quite through the hole, so it's going through the hole properly now. So back to the centre elastic, we heat seal the ends of this as well. Just to stop fraying. Then we put the ends together and just do a simple half knot like so. This knot probably has a name, I don't know it. And then gather the end, this end, and thread it through the centre hole. And that big knot stops it from going all the way through. And then that goes over and closes the traveller's notebook. So that's the completed traveller's notebook. It doesn't actually have anything inside it yet. So I'll just quickly show you what it would look like with some inserts inside. I've printed the B6 insert for February that came in Peony's Pocket, so in Planners Anonymous online. So this is the way you put the inserts in. You basically just thread them through with the elastic in the centre there. And each piece of elastic can hold another book. And you can also use jump bands to add other books, which I've discussed in other tutorials. But there's one book in there. So you can see that's what that looks like. And there's a lot of space on the side here for tabs, etc. Because I love putting side tabs on. Actually, I'll find something with a tab to put on. Okay, I've just grabbed this notes insert out of another traveller's notebook, and that has a side tab on it. So I'll just pop that on the next piece of elastic. So you can see I've put the elastic through the centre, and this does need a bit of a trim, it's a bit long. So that's with the tab on it. And you can see with the width there, there's still a good amount of space there. And the reason I like this space is because my traveller's notebooks end up quite thick. So here's one here, it's got 2 jump bands in it. So I have 6 inserts in it. And with the 6 inserts, you can see this cover here, well, it's clear, so it's a bit harder to see, but it's a 13-inch width cover, and it's really just covering over there.